Hey, what's up guys? My name is Gareth from SimpleStudios, the only game studio dedicated to your success, and in this episode, we're gonna bug fix. I know, super exciting, but yeah, let's get into it. Alrighty guys, so here's what we're doing today. We have our super awesome plan here with the super awesome art that I made, definitely not 5 minutes ago before recording, because I forgot to make a plan. Anyway, what we're doing today is we are going to be fixing the dash, we're going to be fixing the crossbow arrow, and the way that we're going to do a couple of these things is, let me break it down for you. So for the dash, we have to force the player to move in the direction, because if you saw from last episode, and if you didn't see it, go check it out, it's a great video, what they were able to do, if they had enough time, is they were able to dash in one direction, but then stop midway through the dash and pick a different direction and continue their dash. That is not what we want at all. We want them to be pushed along in the dash, and that's that. If they commit to the dash and they screw up, then you know that's on them. And then we're also going to be adding a little bit of a changing color thing so that the player actually knows when they're dashing. And then we're also going to tune a couple of the numbers just to really make sure that the dash feels like a dash and not just a slow movement. And then the way that we're going to fix the arrow, that's actually not the crossbow arrow, sorry. That's a little foreshadowing for what's going to happen in this episode. But the arrow actually refers to the movement arrow that we're going to be fixing. So again, last episode we tried to implement a movement arrow. So if the player was moving right, there would be a little arrow that pointed to the right. If they moved up, then the arrow would be pointing up. If they moved down, then it moved down. You get the idea. But it just didn't instantiate, and quite frankly, it wasn't visible, so you couldn't really tell which direction you were moving. So in this episode, we're going to fix that, and the way that we're going to do that is by having the arrow be a child of the player themselves, and we'll get into that a little bit later. And then we're also going to be checking how the player is moving. So if they're moving right, then the sprite is to the right. If they're moving up, then the sprite moves up, and you get the idea. Then we're also going to be adding a little bit of art. We're going to apply that awesome art, then we're going to test it out, and then coming soon we'll be covering what's going to happen in the next video, but we'll get to that eventually. And then before we actually get into the video itself, we're going to cover what tools we're going to be using. So first of all, we've got ChatGPT, best thing on the market. Would highly recommend that you use it if you're starting out with game development. And even if you know a little bit of coding, use ChatGPT. Take what you know about coding and feed it a solution, and it can give you feedback. It's a great learning tool in my opinion. Next up we have GIMP, the superior Photoshop. Not much else to say there, it's just better. If you're using Photoshop, save yourself the $3,000 a month and just get GIMP. It's free, it's awesome, and no, they're not sponsoring the video, sadly. Then obviously we have creativity, because without creativity you can't make art. And yeah, it's good. Be creative, go make games. Next up we have good music. Obviously I've got the best taste in music, so if you guys want my super awesome playlist, let me know and I'll share a couple tracks. Next up we need our plan. Right here. You can see that we have our plan. Going into game development with a plan is certainly beneficial. Don't do what I did and just kind of freestyle it, because you will lose motivation very fast. And finally, we need Unity. Specifically, the version that I'm using is Unity 2021.1.0 F1. That's also the version that ChatGPT is compatible with, so yeah, that's what I'm using. Anyway, let's get into it. Alrighty, so tackling the dash first, because that's what we said in the plan. I'm not gonna lie, I actually really like the dash. I know I said that we would fix it because if you dashed and then stopped, like if you stopped holding the D key, for example, you would stop moving right, and then you could press any other key and move in that direction. But I actually really like this because, again, if you do make a mistake, yeah, you're going to feel it because the invincibility timer is going to run out, but at the very least you can kind of save your skin and try again. So, my bad, but we'll be replacing fixing the dash with fixing a different thing, which you'll see a little bit later, and I think I actually revealed it in the introduction. So let's move on to the direction arrow. So, with the direction arrow, before, as you can see here, well actually there's nothing to see here because it doesn't work, but if you imagine a little tiny arrow moving around whenever the player moves around, that's what it's supposed to do. So, yeah. Essentially what happened is I didn't make the arrow a child of the player, so when the script was trying to find the arrow, it couldn't find it because it wasn't a child of the player, so because it wasn't a child, it didn't work. So now that we have made it a child, the arrow is actually visible, and as you can see here, it had a couple, how would I say this, unintended functions. It kind of spun around in one place instead of rotating. And while that was certainly a fail, it did actually rotate in the right way. So, like, if we were moving up, then it would point upwards. It just didn't, move upwards. But eventually we did get it, as you can see here, probably on my right, I think. There's some footage of the direction arrow actually working, where if we move up, then the sprite is upwards. If we move down, then the sprite's downwards, and you get the idea. And then wrapping up with the bonus task, because, again, we kind of moved on from the dash, as I really like it, is the crossbow arrow. So, I don't know if you remember from last episode. Again, go watch it if you haven't. It's a great little video. Essentially what happened is the crossbow would instantiate an arrow prefab and then shoot it at an enemy. And while that's fine, if the enemy was below us, the arrow would still be facing right. And that's not how arrows work. They're supposed to rotate. So basically what we did here is we essentially made a circle around the player, and then when an enemy is targeted, it takes the angle of that enemy. So like if they're at a 90-degree angle, for example, the crossbow takes that angle, tells the arrow, hey, shoot at 90 degrees, and then the arrow's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna set my rotation to 90 degrees, and then it shoots at 90 degrees. If the enemy is at 180 degrees, then, again, the crossbow tells the arrow, shoot at 180 degrees, and the arrow adjusts its rotation so that it is 180 degrees, and then it will shoot in that direction. And again, as you can see here in the footage, probably below me or something like that, I don't know where I'm putting this, you can see that this does actually work, and I'm very happy with it. And I will actually draw it out on GIMP really quickly, just to kind of lead you guys through it. Alrighty, so here we go. We're going to draw out our player, and then we're going to add a few enemies into the scene, and then we're going to draw the circle. Again, like I was talking about before, essentially what happens is the player has a giant circle around them that actually knows all the angles, and then it figures out what those angles are, and when an enemy is targeted, it figures out what angle the enemy is at, and then shoots the arrow in that direction. Again, it's a little weird if you don't know a whole lot about radial positions, which, I mean, honestly, who does? Clearly I don't, because I don't actually know math. Anyway, so again, like I was saying before, it figures out the angle that the enemy is on, and then changes the direction of the arrow, and then shoots the arrow in that direction. And we just have a couple more examples here. That's about it. I hope this helps visualize it. And yeah, so that's actually going to be all for this episode. I know I said that I was going to be doing some art, but we're going to push that off to the next video, because the next video is all about new enemies, new targeting types, new bad guys that we're going to have to kill. And yeah, thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope to see you in the next video when we make some super awesome art with Microsoft Paint and GIMP, and we're actually going to have a lot of fun coding and probably breaking the new enemy types. Thank you very much again, and yeah, cheers.